In Musquodoboit Harbour on Nova Scotia's eastern shore, you'll find the Admiral Lake Loop trail. That trail begins after a short walk along Blueberry Run and the Musquodoboit Trailway. That's where I am right now. This used to be the path of a railway that once serviced this region. Over here, well, that's the railway bridge pond. This is the railway trestle bridge, and below me, the Musquodoboit River. The Musquodoboit River starts in the Cobequid Mountains and flows 97 kilometers. 88 kilometers of that is traversable by paddle. The word Musquodoboit translates from the Mi'kmaq word meaning beautiful water. The river ultimately ends at Musquodoboit Harbour as it finds its way into the Atlantic Ocean. This rail trail is where the famous, or perhaps infamous, Blueberry Express used to run. The Blueberry Express was the name of the train service that came through this area, and legend has it that it's got its name because the route was so slow that you could actually get off the train, pick your blueberries, and get back on the train without ever missing a beat. That's a slow train. There are two types of trails in this area. The main rail trail, which is reasonably flat, wide, and well graded. You'll find parking at different spots along the trail, as well as pit toilets. There are also backcountry and wilderness trails, and those are built to wilderness standards, and include trails like the North and South Granite Ridge Trail, and the Admiral Lake Loop Trail, where I'm headed today. Along this trail, you'll find maps that are conveniently located, including ones you can take with you. It's certainly well worth doing that if you're going to be doing one of the wilderness hikes. The trails in this area are managed by the Musquodoboit Trailways Association. They're a non-profit which began in 1998. Over more than 20 years, they've developed 41 kilometers of non-motorized trails through the efforts of volunteers. Their goal is to promote hiking and cycling opportunities on the trail network, while also helping to protect area ecosystems. One of the most popular features of the Admiral Lake Loop Trail is Skull Rock, and that's where I will end my hike today. Skull Rock, well, that's it right there. The Musquodoboit Trailway was in fact the first section of the Trans-Canada Trail to open close to central Halifax. There's a nice railway museum at one of the trailheads which helps tell the story of the railroad that traveled the main trail I started on. This main rail trail officially begins at that railroad museum. It crosses Highway 357 before the trestle bridge where I chose to start my journey today. While I'll be headed off to the Admiral Lake Loop Trail soon, I could just continue on this trail for a distance of about 14.5 kilometers from my starting point, or 15 from the museum. That trail would take me through areas of oaks and maples, as well as past areas where cattle once grazed. In fact, fence posts for the old farms still remain. As you head even further out the trail, you'll skirt the White Lake Wilderness area, which itself is worthy of exploration. But for today, I'm taking the Wilderness Trail towards Admiral Lake that's just up ahead. This is Bear Lake, which is not to be confused with Bears Lake, which is in Halifax. When you reach the pit toilets on this trail, you'll know that you've come to the start of the Admiral Lake Loop. That is, if you're going to do it in a clockwise direction like I am today. When you arrive at the trailhead, it's a good idea to double check the map. The trail can get overgrown in some places and there are some crossings, so you want to make sure you know exactly where you're going. This will be about a 5-kilometer hike from here. The Admiral Lake Loop itself really is closer to 5.5 kilometers long if you include the spur trail that goes up to Skull Rock near the end. While it will feel steep in part, in fact the trail will only vary by 90 meters from its lowest to its highest point. But despite that, there are ups and downs, and that 90 meters will be done a few times over. And that's part of what can make this trail a challenge. The backcountry trails in this area are built to wilderness standards. One thing to remember is the trails occasionally intersect with one another or with portage trails. It's possible to end up on the wrong route for a time and have a longer hike than intended. Yet another good reason to ensure you have water and snacks along with you. There's nothing worse than getting yourself a little turned around, a little lost, and maybe even a little hangry. So do yourself a favor and bring some stuff along, even if you don't think you'll need it. This is the first of many look-offs around the Admiral Lake Loop Trail. It's called Jesse's Diner. I actually have no idea why it's called that, and I tried to find out with no luck. I'm sure after this airs, I will get hundreds of emails telling me different versions of how it got its name. But nonetheless, it's a beautiful spot, especially now as fall is coming into vogue. Below me, Bear Lake, and in the distance, Musquodoboit Harbor. It's a beautiful sunny day today, but last night it rained quite a lot, and so the trail is very, very slippery. It's something to be mindful of.
Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
It's a beautiful fall day here in Musquodoboit, and I'm about 2 kilometers along the Admiral Lake Loop Trail, on my way to the Look-Off and ultimately Skull Rock. This is Eunice Lake. If you were to take the South Granite Ridge Trail, you could actually look down on the lake. It's about 50 meters deep at its deepest point, and it's got a muddy bottom. Hey, how are you?
How are you?
This is the meeting point for everybody. How are you? Hey, how are you?
Hey.
That's Admiral Lake over there. That's the lake that gives this trail loop its name. And this is the Admiral Lake Look-Off. But you can see so much more from here. The Long Lake and Whites Lake wilderness areas, and Ship Harbor in the distance. Being fall, it's absolutely stunning up here. This trail certainly goes up and down a lot as it crosses different hills, and the temperature variations from the bottom to the top can be quite significant. So this spot is called the cave. Of course, it's not really a cave. What's happened here is a couple of rocks have fallen in and created almost like an archway that you can get through. But that's the way the trail goes. Up ahead is the Musquodoboit Harbour look-off. Musquodoboit Harbour is important to many aspects of life in Nova Scotia, including environmentally. At the outer estuary, there is an internationally recognized wetland area, as well as an internationally recognized bird area. The entire area surrounding this hike is home to a wide diversity of wildlife, both plant and animal. Most people do this trail for the views. This is the harbor look-off. From here you can see Musquodoboit Harbour and Pepeswick Inlet. And beyond that, in the distance, Lawrencetown. The view seems to go on forever. I often wonder when I visit trails near towns and villages how the community came to be. Musquodoboit Harbour was settled mostly by loyalists in the 1780s. Settlers from Europe followed in the 18th and 19th century. Much of the early transportation in this area relied on the harbour and the rivers. Roads were rough, though there was a stagecoach that went to Dartmouth starting in 1852 for the princely sum of 5 shillings. The Dartmouth Eastern Railway began in 1912 to carry lumber from here to Dartmouth. The train station in town opened in 1918 and is now on the Canadian Register of Historic Places. One thing I found fascinating was there was no fire service out here until 1961. The Musquodoboit Volunteer Fire Department was created because in 1957, a man named Garth Young saw his home burned to the ground, and he set upon creating a department. While there's little connection to the trail itself, if you had a fire at your house or business, it was the Lands and Forest Department, who were really responsible for forest fires in this area, that responded, often very late, to fires before the department was established here. I've made it to Rolling Rock Look-Off, and you can certainly see how Rolling Rock got its name, unlike Jesse's Diner at the beginning. He's from here, you can see Pepeswick and Musquodoboit Harbour. You can see the railway bridge that I started on at the beginning of this hike. And I'm pretty sure that Rolling Rock will not roll. No luck. I'm getting close to Skull Rock now. Up on this ridge, there's a lot of blueberry plants around and low scrub, some lower trees, some newer growth trees. And that's because of a forest fire that ripped through this area in 1973. Now, as for the blueberry bushes, I'm fairly certain that being up on this ridge, these are not the ones people jumped off the train to come pick. It can be easy to miss the turn for Skull Rock here, despite the sign. A lot of people are tired at this point and just keep going on. Now, if you miss this and take the next turn, you'll end up on the Bear Lake Loop, which is really nice, but would be terribly disappointing if you'd come all this way to see Skull Rock. Well, I finally made it to Skull Rock. This really is the iconic feature of the Admiral Lake Loop trail. It's become really popular with Instagrammers. Skull Rock gets its name not from anything you can see up here, but if you look at this cliff face from down below in the valley or along the rail trail, it really does look like a skull hanging off the side of the cliff. Now, there is a faster way to get up here. Instead of doing the entire 5-kilometer hike to get here, you can start at the other end of the trail, and then it's only about 1.5 kilometers to get up here. I prefer to do the whole hike first because this really is the special moment, and it's nice to end that way. If you consult hiking guides, they'll tell you that this hike is moderate or difficult. The reality is, if you're prepared and have a good level of fitness, it isn't too bad as long as you take your time. It's a beautiful sunny day today. It's even warm, which isn't all that usual for October. But it reminds me of a beautiful hike that I took in Shubie Park earlier this summer. So after the break, I'm going somewhere where the trails are a little bit easier, in one of the most popular parks in all of Nova Scotia.
Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
If you're near Dartmouth, it's well worth the stop at Shubie Park. This is Dartmouth's jewel, a long history and a place where you can come for a lemonade at Lemon Dogs and go for a hike over trails that cross one of the largest linear parks in Canada. One of the most recognizable features of Shubie Park and its trails is the canal system, the Shubenacadie Canal. Now, interestingly, Shubenacadie comes from the Mi'kmaq word Sibonacadie, which means place where the groundnuts grow. And it was an anglicization of that word that came up with the name of the river. So the Shubenacadie Canal is now a National Engineering Historic Landmark. And it crosses all the way from the Bay of Fundy to Halifax Harbour. In fact, you can hike most of that if you want, and Shubie Park is just part of it. And Shubie Park will take you all the way through a number of the walks, which you can cycle by, you can walk, you can even skate in the winter. Fun place to be. As you hike the trails in Shubie Park along the Shubenacadie waterway, it's hard to even believe that this hasn't always been pristine wilderness. But this, where we're walking right now, was once supposed to be a massive housing development. Dartmouth Crossing is only a few hundred meters that way. And at the end of this trail is a campground that was once a quarry. And let's not forget that the canal right beside me was one of the biggest industrial projects in the region in the 1800s. When you watch people playing in this waterway, of course your first thought is this is a natural space, or maybe your thought is to the canal and the Irish and Scottish stonemasons that worked so hard to build this and dig through the rock. But this waterway is so much more. This waterway has been used for thousands of years by the Mi'kmaq to travel across Nova Scotia, and there's been artifacts found up and down the waterway. Shubie Park goes for about 15 kilometers along lakes and canals, but one of the shorter hikes you can do is right in the center, leaving from the Fairbanks Center, where you'll walk around the canal following trail markers and sites like this, which may look just like a pile of rocks, but are actually the remnants of homes. This one in particular is the remnants of a two-family home, Irish immigrants who came here to build the canal and lived right next to it while they were building it. So this is Shubie Park. And you can see here, this is the center with the historic hiking trail that goes along what is the deep cut. That was the hardest part of this canal to build. But down here you see just how big this park actually is. It goes all the way from near Micmac Mall right to the end of Lake Charles. And the very famous Lake Charles Trail, which is great fun for hiking and biking, snowshoeing, you name it, lots of activities to do there. But one of the hidden gems of Shubie Park are the Ospreys that come back every year. And that's where we're heading. That's just up here. As a commercial venture, the Shubenacadie Canal was just never successful. But you know, as a recreational waterway 200 years later, it's probably one of the most important things we have here in Nova Scotia. A hiking trail on water, if you will. So this is one of the fun things about Shubie Park. The wildlife here is so used to being fed by people that they'll land right in their hands. So are you wondering what happened to the canal company? Well, I mentioned it went bankrupt, but it's kind of ironic why. The only real commercial success the canal had was in transporting goods for the railway. And it was ultimately a railway bridge that put an end to the canal. If you want to go and see the park's ospreys, you have to leave the center of Shubie Park that most people spend their time in and head down the Lake Charles Trail. There are almost endless hiking opportunities in Shubie Park. Trails that go everywhere. You could spend days in here and never do the same trail twice. But on this little turn, we're going to find the ospreys. And when you're shooting ospreys, you always want a long lens. There's something for everybody on the Shubie trails, no matter what your interest. So wherever your walkabout finds you, I hope you have fun.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, feel the sunshine. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, feel the sunshine.